Hey future Twig, past Twig here once again with another MTG deck tech for everyone. This deck is going to be tiled once more with feeling, and let's get right into it. First off, inspiration for this deck tech came a little while ago, actually about 5 days ago, when I did a review of a card call out for a card called Deathmatch, which whenever a creature comes into play, that creature's controller may have target creature of his or her choice get -3/-3 until end of turn. And I happened to get a comment on that video by Yu-Gi-Oh! Nerd22, yes, he's back at it again, explaining that he actually had a card called Sibsig Ceremony, which basically states that creature spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. However, whenever a creature you control enters, if you cast it, destroy that creature and then create a 2/2 black zombie druid creature token. And he and I got to talking in the comments section of that video, and immediately were like, wow, there's quite a bit of synergy going on here. You get basically 2 creatures for the price of 1. You can still get a very powerful enter the battlefield effect. And there's a lot of ways we could kind of abuse this like creature entering token abuse strategy stuff to potentially keep the board clear and swing in for the win for your tokens. And so anyways, a whole explosion of ideas came from this conversation with me coming up with cards such as the Heartless Summoning and Torgar Famine Incarnate. And because of that, I just basically branched out into this entire deck concept. So basically the plan is as follows, which is that you want to play powerful cards like the Sibsig Ceremony that lower the cost of creatures in the early game. Use that to get out creatures for cheap like the Grey Merchant of Asphodel, where you can get like various enter the battlefield effects to put the game in your favor. And then you hopefully want to recur those creatures with cards like Body Launderer to bring them back and get even more ETBs, more creatures to drop, more 2/2 black zombie creature tokens, and so on and so forth. More triggers for Death March as well. So initially when I was looking at commanders for this deck, I thought of Geth, Thane of Contracts. You can actually see that in the original YouTube comment I left. However, I ended up deciding that he wasn't quite with the theme of the deck, and he was a bit slow, and that activate ability was quite expensive. I also thought about Vahati Indal because it would be great to basically take any creature, give it toughness of 1, and then be able to kill it with stuff like Death March. However, the commander I ended up actually going with was a slightly different commander, and is actually a commander I have wanted to build around for basically since she was announced. And that commander is Kinzu of the Bleak Coven. Ever since Phyrexia All Will Be One dropped, I've always wanted to build this commander. She's very unpopular, very inexpensive on the financial side of things, and she has the ability that she is a 5-mana creature, 5/4 flyer, pretty good already, with the ability that whenever another non-token creature you control dies, you may pay 2 life and exile it. If you do, create a token that's a copy of that creature, except that it's a 1/1 and has Toxic 1. So basically, by giving up a little bit of life whenever one of our non-token creatures enters and is destroyed or sacrificed by us, it gets to immediately come back for free as a 1/1 and comes back with Toxic 1, which means you could also theoretically build a poison counter strategy, which I did not do in this deck. Getting into the early game, obviously, as I mentioned, first thing you want to do is get your creatures to be more inexpensive. I include Heartless Summoning here with a side note. A big thing of Heartless Summoning is that it's negative, is that creatures you control get -1/-1. Think like that Geth Thane of Contracts ability. And the issue with this, of course, is that Kinzu brings back your creatures as 1/1 tokens of themselves. So theoretically, whenever you bring a creature back with Kinzu, if this card is out on the field, that creature is instantly going to die, but you will still get enter the battlefield triggers and effects from it. So I believe that Heartless Summoning offers you enough value to warrant it. However, if you find that that's not the case, feel free to remove it and slot something else in. Moving on, you also want cheap creatures like Shambling Ghast. These don't benefit from Heartless Summoning, but you do want to have some early game plays and cards that you can kind of slide in around other cards just to make sure that you always have targets to sacrifice and always have effects that you can gain to get benefits like being able to create triggers or tokens. And lastly, you want sacrifice outfits. There's a ton of different types of sacrifice outfits in this deck, but one of the ones I want to highlight was Sodevli Adnate. This is such a fun card, I think, in this deck in particular, because a lot of our creatures were trying to low on the higher mana cost side of things, and being able to sacrifice them to get back mana so we can continue to cycle out creatures is a fantastic ability, and one that I can't wait to see how it works out with in this deck. Getting into the mid game is when we really want to start ramping up and getting more powerful dice triggers and sacrifice triggers out there. I'm experimenting with this card. It may not fully stick around, but that's Cathlodon, which is fantastic because since we have a lot of cards in this deck that try to reduce the cost of creatures, he can actually maybe generate us excess mana, which will be fantastic for helping boost out even more cards or effects or abilities. Moving on, you obviously also want to make sure you have card draw and such. So we have cards like Felstinger, which is both a sacrifice outlet and a card draw engine. So, and also just a death touch body. So just all around a lot of value there. And last but not least is Mimic Vat. And this might be my favorite card in all of Magic the Gathering. It is so versatile in what it can do. And in particular with this deck, what is fantastic is that it allows us to exile one of our creatures and bring it back for 3 mana every single time. And given the fact that we have a lot of higher costed creatures with powerful abilities, that's actually very affordable for us. Additionally, this also serves as pseudo removal in the fact that if one of your opponent's creatures is very powerful, with a great enter the battlefield effect, it dies. You can actually capture it under Mimic Vat here, and then constantly get out tokens of it. So you can actually also steal your opponent's enter the battlefield effects if they would be more advantageous to you. Last off, of course, we have the big bodies themselves, the in-game creatures to help us win the game. Including this one here, Massacre Worm. I will say all of the cards in this deck are at or under $1. He is one of the only, I think it's only 2 cards I have in the deck that are over $1, but I've never seen him this cheap before. I've always wanted to play with this card. He seems fun, and this is a perfect deck for him because being able to get that double enter the battlefield trigger going is just fantastic. Second off, you have cards like Junji the Midnight Sky. I love these modal style cards where you get to choose what you want to have happen. In particular, I'm looking at that last ability of his, which is that you can basically recur a non-dragon creature card from any graveyard onto the battlefield for only a little bit of life. We have several different cards in this deck, also like Puppeteer Click, that will do this, so we can get out our opponent's creatures, our own creatures, out of the graveyard and just continue to get enter the battlefield's effects and get massive bodies onto the table so that we can swing for the win. Last but not least is actually Torgar, Famine Incarnate. I've immediately thought of this card when I thought about building this deck. He is fantastic. He's very expensive at base, but you can sacrifice other creatures to basically reduce his casting cost, which is also just a great way to have a sacrifice outlet built into him. Additionally, his second ability is that whenever he enters the battlefield, up to one target's life total becomes half their starting life total rounded down. So basically, in a game of Commander, your starting life total, he'll set your life total to 20 again. So this can either be used to cut off a massive chunk of an opponent's life to make it easier to kill them, or in the case I thought of him for this deck, it's fantastic because it allows us to preserve our own life total. Because one of the things we do have in this deck is a lot of ways to lose life through drawing cards. Kenzu's abilities cost 2 life per creature, so on and so forth. But we don't have as many ways to recur life. So having Torgar in here gives us a great panic button, reset our life total to 20 if it's starting to dip too low. And lastly is the category called Other Fun Cards, because there were some other fun cards that I've not seen a whole lot before, and I'm looking forward to using in this deck. One of our removal spells is Come Back Wrong, which is a 3-mana sorcery, so not the best for removal, but I love this effect of whenever you can destroy target creature card. If it is destroyed and sent to the graveyard, you actually return it to the battlefield under your control. So you use this, you attack one of your opponent's creatures that has a nice enter the battlefield ability, you get it back for a turn, and then there's all sorts of beautiful stuff that benefits from creatures on your side of the field dying. So fantastic all-around removal there. You also have cards like Altar of Baal. I love this because it can be a 3-mana sorcery just to get out a creature for sacrificing. And additionally, if you choose to play it out, and you have some spare mana kicking around, which we might actually have with this deck being fairly powerful on the mana side of things, you can exile creatures like creature tokens you control and return creature cards from the graveyard to the battlefield. So just another way to get that creature recursion going and kind of work with the main plan of our deck. Last but not least, you want cards that benefit you whenever creatures die. And Sister of Skulls is one that I've always wanted to use. This card is fantastic because it allows us to turn our non-token creatures into more creatures, which means that we can have Death March continue the proc and trigger off of all these little 1/1s entering. And there are also Eldrazi Scions, which are little 1/1s, which are fantastic because they can self-sacrifice and give you mana so you can cast your more expensive cards as well. So we have lots of recursion and lots of redundancy with various mechanics in this deck. And last but not least is Crowded Crypt. This card was originally like 30 cents when I first saw it, and then it jumped up to like $3 to $5, and has since been reprinted, so now it's back under the dollar mark, which is fantastic because this one basically it's a mana rock that continuously grabs corpse counters whenever creatures we control die. Note that says creatures we control die, not non-token creatures. So even our creature tokens that we generate with Kenzu will count towards Crowded Crypt. And of course, you can then sacrifice it for 6 mana and create a ton of zombie creature tokens, which can trigger Death March a whole bunch of times and also allow you to swing in for the win. And last but not least is any cards that I miss, guys. Because I will say one of the cards I'm going to highlight that's in this deck now is Promise of, I'm not even going to try to say that, Alcazaz. I'm not even sure how you would pronounce that name. Demonic names. And what's cool about this card is that I didn't even know it existed until I started building this deck, and I happened to luck out when I was doing a random Scryfall search and found it. And it is, in fact, I believe, the only black card in all of Magic the Gathering that has the Populate ability, so being able to create a copy of a token that's on the field, such as, for example, any of the tokens that Kenzu can produce with her ability. And not only does it create new tokens of creatures, it can also help as a sacrifice outlet, and we can just also use it to actually get out a big beater in the form of a black vampire demon with flying. So this card is perfect for our deck, but I almost didn't include it because I didn't even know it existed, and I know that you guys have seen cards that I have not, so feel free to leave any cards that you would include in this deck down in the comments below. And also, remember that this deck is a work in progress. It is in need of a lot of fine-tuning. I have not had a chance to test it fully yet. And so there's probably going to be a lot of areas that could use some refinement, perhaps certain areas that need to be cut back on, certain cards where you need more of them, and so on and so forth. But either way, thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the deck tech, and you will field deck list in the description below. Thank you so much, and take care.